This podcast is brought to you with limited interruption by Rudy Luther Toyota. Whether looking for an exciting brand new Toyota, a certified pre-owned vehicle, or getting quality routine maintenance and service for your vehicle, Rudy Luther Toyota is the place to go. Rudy Luther Toyota, the southeast corner of 394 and 169 in Golden Valley. Broadcasting live on AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota. In the evenings on WCPT 820 Chicago's Progressive Talk, and in the nighttime hours, 1150 AM KKNW in Seattle. It is the Matt McNeil Show for your Friday. Good to have you with us today. Matt and Patrick here today. Patrick, do you have any fun plans scheduled for this weekend?
I am going to go leaf peeping.
You are going to go leaf watching. Where? Well, I mean, I was up in Duluth last weekend, north of the Twin Cities metro area. It was about a week off there. Is that where you're headed?
Yeah, so I'll be headed up north, and then as things start to spread south, I'll hopefully take a drive along the Mississippi River in the next couple weeks, too.
That's always nice there. I mean, it's for people who are listening south of us, it's always kind of funny because they're like, wait, it just got to be October. The leaves are starting to change. Yes, it is. We'll have spectacular leaves in Minneapolis, St. Paul Metro, somewhere around the 20th or so. That's generally what we get. I know it gets, and then it's a week, for every 100 miles, it's another week after that, kind of going south. So I hope you get out and enjoy it. Tonight, there's a decent chance we could see the Aurora Borealis. So I'm going to head on out of the metro area tonight to go out and see if I can spy some things in the sky. And then I'm doing the apple picking again, coming up here on Sunday, just because, awesome. That's why. Absolutely awesome. I hope whatever plans you have for the weekend, I hope that they're good. 952-946-6205. 952-946-6205 is the phone number. Coming up in the 4 o'clock hour locally, Children's Theater, we're going to talk to them about their new production. Michael Brodkorb comes and talks to us a little bit about the Vikings football, but we'll get that in the 4 o'clock hour. Wide open in the 3 o'clock hour right now, locally, the current hour you're listening to, wherever you're at in Chicago or in Seattle, 952-946-6205. So I said a while back, I could tell that in some states, Republican-leading states, that generally you wouldn't think would be trouble for Trump, that they're going to be some trouble for Trump. Now, North Carolina is the prime example, but there's an outlier there. It's going to, there are some potential historic elements of it. I mean, Robinson as their gubernatorial candidate for the Republicans is so bad. I mean, now pretty much every consistent poll I am seeing shows him 15 to 20 points behind the Democrat. That is pretty consistent now. Now, there is this question, and I've tried to do some research on it. I haven't been able to find too much on it. What is the effect on the other races when you have a candidate that is polling that low? What happens? Now, if it's the top of the ticket that's polling that low in a state, generally it will drag everyone else down. We see it to a point here in the suburban area of the Twin Cities where the Republican candidates out there is like, I'm really an independent. They know Trump is not popular in the suburbs. They know Trump is not, especially with women. They know that the Senate candidate here in the state of Minnesota, and I'm going to get to him because Heartland Signal has, we got a story about him coming up here. But, he's not that popular in the state, and so their only option is to kind of present themselves as an independent. But even so, at the time of the ballot, it comes down, you're the Republican, a Republican candidate at the top of the ticket is wildly unpopular. It drags people down. It's harder to find information about what's going on in North Carolina because in their case, it's the second race on the ticket. It's the gubernatorial race. And but you have such a toxic candidate in Robinson that now they're stuck with him. That is the guy. That is who is going to be on the ballot. How much can he score and underperform in that state to where it does not affect Trump? usually you can see about a 5 or 6 point. That's somewhat common, So let's take a look. North Carolina is a leaning Republican state. So if Robinson was, say, 6-7 points below, losing by 6 or 7 points to the Democrat, sure, you could easily see Trump make that up. That's within margins. 10 to 12. All right, kind of. Now we're starting to get into historic outliers sort of thing, where you're so far out of the realm of feasibility. It's not, considering the nature of it and Robinson's unique situation where, who doesn't love a chat room on a porn site? But you're getting to 15 to 17 to 20 points below the Democrat on the gubernatorial race. I don't know in North Carolina if you have people there who are basically saying you can vote for the Democrat for Senate, just remember to vote for Trump on the top of the ticket. They might actually have a full-fledged campaign there. That could be the case. Quietly and, probably without Robinson knowing about it. But I have a very hard time seeing a gubernatorial candidate for the Republicans losing by 15 points and Trump somehow pulling that state out. North Carolina is kind of its own thing. I talked about Florida. I said, Florida, watch Florida. That constitutional amendment question, which enshrines abortion rights into the state constitution in Florida, has to get 60%, which is it's starting to turn into a big problem. And by the way, let's take a look. Remember I was talking about those numbers, but what's feasible? How bad can Robinson tank before it really starts to hurt Trump? In Florida, the Republicans did this thing where it's like, you can't pass this unless you got a 60% vote, to try to stop Democrats from putting ballot initiatives on and getting them passed with just a simple majority. But now that's come back and smacked them, because now you have a constitutional amendment where you actually have, I think the last polling said 62% of Floridians want that passed. Most of them are not Trump fans and blame Trump for them having to vote on this. You have seen this affect Rick Scott's Senate race down there. You have seen this affect Donald Trump's rating. Florida is in play. In the last 4 weeks, I have yet to see a poll that says Trump is leading by more than 3 points in Florida. And I've seen polls which are saying Harris is leading in Florida. I have seen polls where Rick Scott is losing in Florida. And yeah, Georgia is another state. Well, how about I go with Arizona? Because I'm about to bring up a story here that doesn't bring up Arizona, but Kari Lake is becoming less and less popular in Arizona as this election goes on. As a matter of fact, I saw a poll today that said 13 points. And once again, where is that margin of this is too much of a gap for Trump to be able to overcome? Because once again, and I'll go back to something that Jeff Stein says all the time, all politics is local. Politics is local. And so when you have the people in Arizona are paying attention to the Senate race, that's high on their mind. And you have her 12 to 13 points behind her Democratic opponent, you're running into the same problem in Arizona as they're running into North Carolina, although, I don't think Kari Lake has the, porn site chat room issue. I would hope not, dear Lord. Having two, can you imagine if we had two of those in one election cycle? Oh my God. No, Kari Lake, to my knowledge, is not that. She is, I will say this. This is not an easy thing to say, but I'll say this. Kari Lake is a more appetizing candidate than Robinson in North Carolina. Still, both of them trail behind Royce White in Minnesota. I'll get to that. I will get to that eventually. But Georgia, it seems as if what the Republicans have done down there is say, we need to fix this election, actually fix it. And so Trump wins even if he doesn't win. And so there's been more and more down there. But there's also been more and more numbers which are showing, especially the African-American vote in Florida, very strongly there. I mean, a lot of people went out there and double-checked their voters' registration, which that was a little trick. And you should pay attention to this. I think Alaska's voter registration check date, the final day is the 6th, which would be Sunday. For many states, especially Republican states, the last time you can verify your state of registration for voting is on Monday. I think Texas, Georgia, other states, a lot of southern states, Indiana's in there, Ohio is in there. Those are the last days you can check your voter registration to make sure you're registered. And what they've had in these states is indeed people double checking and verifying. And these numbers are scaring the living daylights out of the Republicans. According to ex-RNC head Michael Steele, now co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend, Trump is at risk of losing both Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina. This is him talking, not me. This is just backing up what I've been saying. Writing for MSNBC, Steele made the claim and then assured readers that is not a typo. After pointing out that over 1 million Americans have already taken advantage of early voting laws in their respective states, Steele claimed that late deciders will be pivotal in November, and those 3 states are ripe for the plucking by the Harris campaign. Steele pointed out Trump notably had lost Georgia in 2020 to President Joe Biden, and North Carolina has been turning into more of a swing state with every passing election. Florida, he added, is close enough that late-breaking group of Harris voters could make the difference. As we get closer to Election Day, these voters get more engaged. Their intentions begin to shift and may even harden into support as they read up on the 2 candidates, listen closer and to their arguments, and shift their attitudes. When they do, they can change the political landscape dramatically in short order. He wrote, in Florida, voters are also considering ballot measures to legalize recreational cannabis and codify abortion rights, popular policies that align with the Harris-Walz agenda. He added the caveat, to be clear, I'm not saying Harris will outright win Georgia, North Carolina, Florida, or even that she'll win it all. But what I'm saying is that the polls can't yet capture what these late deciders intend to do before reminding readers of 2016 and Donald Trump pulled out the surprise wins, many there. The only thing you can do is cast your own ballot. And that's true. Everyone votes. We're in prime door knocking time. Volunteer with a campaign. Get out there, door knock. Write out some postcards. Make some phone calls. Make a donation. Make sure you're registered to vote. And this is the consequence of one term of Donald Trump. Everyone has to vote in every freaking election for 30 years. They just have to. So everyone votes. But right now, I will say this, and polls take them with a grain of salt, but I will say this. I don't see Donald Trump starting to swing New Mexico or Colorado or Minnesota, but I'm starting to see Harris start getting mentioned a lot more in Texas, in Florida, North Carolina. We'll take a break, come back. It's the Matt McNeil Show.
2010, when we were all just kids.
If I were a human being, I'd head straight for New Orleans, and I'd blow this horn so hot and strong like no one ever.
It is the Matt McNeil Show. By the way, grossly underrated Disney film. Princess and the Frog. My God, is that a good film? The music in that film, is probably the best of all of them, hands down. It is the Matt McNeil Show. Good to have you with us today. 952-946-6205. 952-946-6205. So, I'm going to, all right, I'm going to spend some time talking about stuff that is got a Minnesota slant, but I'm not bringing this up. Well, I guess I'm bringing the first one up because, it's that bad. Heartland Signal has a little story on our Senate candidate here, and I got to bring it up. But there's another story out of Minnesota that actually backs up what I've been talking about, how Republicans have bailed on rural America. And it is a tragedy how much they are not doing for rural America. And I'll get to that here in a little bit. But let's go to Heartland Signal. As the control of the Senate hangs in the balance, GOP candidates across the country are facing a similar problem. Troubling and bizarre past statements, both in person and on social media, are coming back to haunt them. But in Minnesota, Royce White has even a more extreme case. Now, I have talked about Royce White. I have said with confidence, even with the porn site chat box stuff of Robinson, Royce White is the worst candidate I have ever seen for a federal office. He is grossly unqualified. He is an absolute disaster of a candidate. And if you paid attention to my social media pages, where you can find me on Facebook, on Blue Sky, on Mastodon, on Threads, and on Twitter. All right, you can find me there. Since the primary in Minnesota, which was on August 13th, I have noticed that the Republican Party of Minnesota has not even mentioned or acknowledged their own official U.S. Senate candidate, the highest ranking race on the Minnesota ballot this election cycle. They have not mentioned Royce White at all. You don't see a lot of Royce White signs. You see a few out there, but they're few and far between. He is a wildly unpopular guy. And before we even get to what I'm about to get to, which, by the way, get your jaws ready to fall to the floor. This is a guy who has a long history of insanely misogynistic, anti-LGBTQ, anti-Semitic comments on his social media. No one vetted this guy. He is an absolute disaster. And he is a broken man. He has called me personally cuck. Okay? I prefer soy boy. I don't have the slightest. You guys can't insult. I'll tell you what, someday I'll give you a lesson on how to insult people because, you know, you guys, if you're calling me soy boy, okay, I'm soy boy. All right. I know in your little alpha man little club over there, that's some sort of wicked insult, but you know, yeah, okay, fine. Anyway, I'll do that later. So this is and yes, a U.S. Senate candidate. I know my role on this planet. I'm a trained chimp that sits into a studio, talks to myself with a microphone around me, and they've put a camera on me. Hello. I understand what my role is. Why are you're a U.S. Senate candidate. Why am I even on your radar? But hey, I guess you're not doing much else. I don't know. Anyway, Royce White. A little bit of a rough candidate for the Republican Party. In a tweet from 2022 that has since resurfaced, White claims that the bad guys won the Second World War. Yes, I did not see that coming. Royce White says the bad guys, which... hello, troops that fought for the United States in World War II. Apparently, Royce White thinks you are the bad guys. He thinks the bad guys won World War II. Wow. He stated, the bad guys won in World War II. There were no good guys in that war. This controlling interest had a jump ball. If you look closely, you see the link between liberalism and communism in the Allied forces. I do not have the slightest idea where you even begin to go with this. Because there are some things which are pretty basic, standard educational stuff. When it's bright outside, that means the sun is out. Water is wet. I mean, that's just kind of one of those things. And the good guys won World War II. A lot of people fought to defeat the Nazis. And the Nazis were really bad with the Holocaust and the mass extermination of the Jews. They were the bad guys. The good guys won that war at a horrible, horrible cost. But the brain trust that's Royce White apparently doesn't agree with that. As it known to most, the Allied forces were fighting to defeat the Nazis and eliminate genocidal fascism that had taken much of Europe and Asia, but not advancing controlling interests, while also erroneously claiming that George Patton was murdered. Now, George Patton was not murdered. In reality, the general died in 1945 from complications from a car crash. White also has a habit of alienating voters, including members of his own party. In one recent exchange, he called his Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell rhino scum. In another, he called National Republican Senatorial Committee Chair Steve Daines a rhino and neocon. and indicated he would track Republicans down and weed them out if they weren't extreme enough. He's talking about his own party. Yeah, not soy boy over here. In one specific interaction from Monday, White told a potential voter to pull their skirt down and that nobody cares about your preferences, to which the voter replied, "Blank you then, you just lost my family's support." With polls showing White trailing significantly behind incumbent Amy Klobuchar, the campaign faces an uphill battle that is further complicated by his erratic past and incendiary comments. White's bizarre social media posts, as well as his abrasive interactions with members of both parties, have raised repeated questions, not just about his temperament, but also his suitability for office. Heartland Signal has been closely following the former NBA player's political career since his shift to electoral politics, with some calling him the most unhinged tinfoil hat candidate in recent memory. Guilty as charged. While White has long been a supporter of right-wing intellectuals like Jordan Peterson, Alex Jones, and Glenn Beck, with him previously hosting a TV show on Jones's InfoWars network. For the GOP, this race is emblematic of a broader challenge, quality candidates. As Republicans struggle to field competitive candidates in key battleground states, it's becoming clear that a lack of coherent messaging and failure to resonate with the majority of suburban voters could be a major liability as they seek to regain control of the Senate. You guys aren't vetting these guys. And this is the problem. And you want to know, this is the eventual outcome of the 2010 election. The 2010 election, the Democrats stayed at home. The Republicans won in a landslide. And they were able to redistrict and create these safe states where Republicans couldn't lose. And the mistake that they made was that, well, we'll just have the Republican win. And the problem is people want a choice. And so you put out your traditional Republican candidates, but all of a sudden, from the extreme far right, came these loon ball candidates that nobody could control. And they started garnering traction. And now it's gotten to where it's an avalanche down the hill. And now most of your candidates across the board, a lot of them, are these unelectable loon balls. Nice going, guys. I got more when I come back. It's the Matt McNeil Show.
Believe your eyes if 10 million fireflies lit up the world as I fell asleep.
Broadcasting at night at WCPT 820 Chicago's Progressive Talk. In the nighttime hours, 11:50 a.m. KKNW in Seattle, and of course live in Minneapolis, St. Paul on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. It is the Matt McNeil Show. How DFL, the Minnesota Democratic Party, the DFL here in Minnesota, how are you not getting billboards up across the state saying the Minnesota GOP Senate candidate thinks the bad guys won World War II? And scene. Not only, I mean, seriously, if you use Royce White as a weapon against them, not only are you going to save Angie Craig's seat over in Minnesota 2, but Minnesota 8, Stauber's in trouble. Minnesota 1, the Beeve down there, the Republican, he's in trouble too. But, you know, hey, heaven forbid you use their easiest weapon they're giving us. Here, take this sword, swing hard for my head. You know, that, you know, take it. Royce White is the gift that keeps on giving. To give you an example of this just broke in the last, hour and a half. This is from Christopher Ingram. In his latest podcast, Minnesota GOP endorsed U.S. Senate candidate Royce White defends Civil War slave owners. Now, just for the record here, Royce White is African-American. I know. He was saying the slave owners were fighting to protect the rights of the minority. Wow. Here is the quote from his podcast. He actually posted this. Actually, the slave owners were the minority. Black people weren't the minority. They were the racial minority, but the slave owners were the super minority. And they were fighting for, in a sense, was to protect the rights of the minority, to say, just because we're in the minority doesn't mean we have to do what everybody else says. He is saying this about slavery. He is defending the people that if they saw him today would want him as a slave because they were slave owners. Boom! I know. But heaven forbid. A flamethrower, you say? Well, let me have it. Thank you very much. Oh, God. Like I said, I understand people say Robinson's so bad and Carrie Lake is bad. No. No. Not since I'm not a witch. has there been? I mean, I think he's worse than that weirdo that ran in Delaware 10 years ago or 15 years ago. When you have to do a campaign ad that says, "I'm not a witch." Really? Okay, yeah. Your campaign's taken a veer. You've gone off course. But Royce White is truly the worst candidate I've ever seen for any federal office. And I guarantee you, in 10 years, you will look at Royce White like he was, a steadfast politician considering where these people are going. Marjorie Taylor Greene insists that the Democrats are controlling the weather to hurt people so that they sent that hurricane to go get them. The same woman who basically thinks that whenever an earthquake happened, that's God punishing people on the West Coast. Now, all of a sudden, when under her theory, God sends a hurricane into the southeastern United States, it's, those are the Jewish space lasers run by the Democrats. I mean, you cannot, these people are the dumbest human beings on the planet. And because the national news media doesn't feel it's our point to point out their stupidity and how wrong they are, they get a pass. And by the way, can I bring that up really quick? Was it yesterday or the day before yesterday? Donald Trump literally called Jimmy Carter Jimmy Connor multiple times. And yet the same news media that if Joe Biden had done that once at a rally would have demanded, once again, his mind is gone. Oh, he needs to withdraw. Boy, oh boy, is he just not mentally there. Not a peep from the national media about this. Nothing. The bias of the national media to make sure they sane wash, whitewash, and basically dismiss things that they would demand Democrats resign from office for is insane. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. So I want to get into a story from rural Minnesota, but this backs up what I have been saying this week, and I've said this a few times, and that is that it is amazing to me to watch 50 years ago, the Republicans took over rural America, have not really released their grip on it. And if you go to rural America, it's not entirely, you can't paint with a wide brush everywhere, but the vast majority of rural America is far worse off than they were 50 years ago. There's no jobs, there's no stores, education. I mean, you used to probably have a local school there. Now your kid's on a bus for 45 minutes to go to the nearest consolidated school district. Hospitals are shutting down there. It's everything. The mentality of the right is that the people that are there are subservient to them and the powerful, wealthy people that basically bankroll them. And I've said this before. I've talked about this before on the show. There is a stunning amount of these people who don't even live in the areas where they're bankrolling the politicians. These wealthy corporate farmer guys, the ones that they put on the brand new flannel shirts and jeans to go out there and do their photo op with them holding a pumpkin to say, see, I'm a farmer. They're not farming. It's corporate farming. They have a staff to do that. They have a lovely big house out in the country. They don't live there. They're living in the large metro areas where the kids have the better schools. There's better health care. They're better this. But they basically are bankrolling the politicians in these rural communities to keep things bad. Evergreen Acres Dairy will pay $250,000 in back wages and make repairs to its workers' housing and settle a lawsuit brought by the Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, who alleged the dairy's owners underpaid hundreds of workers while charging them for squalid, cockroach-infested housing. Yee. The settlement with Evergreen Acres, which operates 18 facilities across central Minnesota, represents a rare victory in the fight against wage theft, one of Ellison's signature priorities. Today, we send a strong message that dairy farms like Evergreen and all employers in Minnesota cannot illegally profit off the backs of workers, Ellison said in a statement on Thursday. Yet the agreement also reflects the paltry price employers can expect to pay for cheating workers if they're penalized at all. The $250,000 settlement amount is less than 1/10 of the $3 million Ellison's office said workers were owed in the lawsuit filed in January. Fee Justica Worker Center Executive Director Maya Alana Gutierrez also helped in the workers bring their complaints to the Attorney General, said she's glad the abuses came to light but disappointed by the settlement amount. It's not fair. It's not justice. I think the workers deserve more. Brian Evans, a spokesperson for the Attorney General, said they believed the settlement was the best deal they could get for workers given the financial struggles that many of the dairy industry are facing. Evans said the office is still working to identify which workers are eligible for compensation, so could not say how many workers will receive back pay. Evergreen Acres owners Keith Schaefer and his daughter Megan Hill did not have to admit any wrongdoing as part of the settlement, and it's unclear if they will face any criminal charges, even though stealing wages in excess of $1,000 is a felony under Minnesota law since 2019. A spokesperson for the Stearns County Attorney's Office said no criminal cases involving Schaefer or Hill have been referred to them. Attorney for Schaefer and Hill did not respond to an email seeking comment. The lawsuit is one of the largest wage theft cases brought by the Attorney General's office and alleged horrific abuses of the dairy immigrants' workforce that went far beyond stolen wages. When one employee did not report to work because of an injury, Schaefer allegedly grabbed him by his neck, pushed him against the wall, and told him that if he did not get back to work, he had to leave Evergreen within 10 minutes. Another employee was fired for taking a day off to go to a clinic after he got chemicals in his eyes while on the job, according to a complaint. Schaefer allegedly threatened to kill one employee and reminded the workers of a dog he recently killed. Wow. He told other employees, many of them whom are undocumented immigrants, that he would call the police on them, according to the complaint. Oh, yeah, this guy's big time MAGA. Other details read like they were ripped from the pages of Upton Sinclair's The Jungle or George Orwell's Down and Out in Paris and London. Some employees who work 12-hour day shifts share the same bed with others who work 12-hour night shifts, and they had their wages automatically deducted for rent. Evergreen employees regularly work 6 days a week for $12.50 to $17.50 per hour until Evergreen Acres made them salaried employees, according to Ellison's lawsuit. Workers lived in garages, barns, other buildings unfit for human habitation. Some lived with bedrooms and bathrooms covered in mold, while others didn't even have toilets. Ellison accused Evergreen Acres of exploiting workers' vulnerabilities, saying many are from a region that speak a specific language of Spanish, and Spanish is their second language. So many have limited or no English, no understanding of their rights as workers, regardless of the immigration status. Ellison's office noted the various tasks workers have to do, corralling cows, breeding cows, cleaning manure, are physically demanding and run the risk of death and serious injury. In March, Ellison's office announced a temporary injunction in which the dairy agreed to keep proper records of employee hours, stop charging rent for substandard housing, and pay for a housing inspector to document any housing code violations. As part of the settlement dismissing the case, the Attorney General's office will be able to monitor the Minnesota Dairy and its related companies, Evergreen Estates and Morgan Feedlots, for future violations for the next 3 years. Schaefer and Hill must submit regular payroll records to the Attorney General's office and allow inspections of its employee housing to ensure it meets basic habitability standards. Yep, horrible people. I mean, really horrible people. People who were keeping other human beings in horrific, subhuman conditions because they could. Because they could. I find it always pretty interesting that when one white guy says, I was attacked by 20 black people, what happens? The right wing goes, look at this poor individual who was attacked, even though there's no corroborating witness to say anything that they're saying is truthful. But you can have 20 Hispanic people working in a dairy with a guy who clearly seems to be, at least from their stories, a freaking psychopath, who is basically holding realizing his power and basically abusing it wherever he can. And the first thing out of most Republicans' mouths is, well, come on, Matt. Are you going to take the word of all 20 of those guys over the one guy who's a business owner? He's a business owner, Matt. Exactly. This is a disgusting story. I mean, it is truly disgusting. And I want to make sure we understand, across this country right now, there are hundreds of these types of situations in rural America. Hundreds. And you know why? The person that brought the charges was the state attorney general. The county attorneys, they didn't do squat. I don't know if they knew this was going on. I'm sure they'll insist they had no idea. They had no idea. My God, if I would have known. But the reality is, and I'm just pure speculation, my guess is they had some idea this was going on. And they were quick to ignore it. This seems like there was heaps of evidence that these people were mistreating other human beings. And these local county attorneys, who are Republicans, who are elected there, who are terrified, because I tell you what, if I start going after them, they're going to just give all their campaign donations to the other guy. And I mean, I want to run for office a few more times. I'm just pure speculation. Pure speculation. I have no idea what the motivation was, but not a single freaking county attorney in rural America filed a lawsuit to stop this heinous crime against other human beings. And today they're saying, well, I haven't gotten any charges given to me. They could go file charges tomorrow. Well, not tomorrow, Saturday. They could file charges Monday. Easily. They have no intention of doing so. You know why? Because out in rural America, the wealthy, predominantly white corporate ag business person, they're the real decider of what happens. And county attorneys, even though they've got mountains of evidence of truly horrible crimes, just sit there on their hands and say, well, if I make a big deal out of this, I'm going to lose my office. Yeah, it's broken out there, thanks to the Republicans. It's the Matt McNeil Show.
Wait, I'm ready for action.
Hey, Mr. DJ, put a record on. I wanna dance with my baby.
Broadcasting in Seattle, Chicago, and Minneapolis, St. Paul, it's the Matt McNeil Show on your Friday. Nice to have you with us today. 952-946-6205. 952-946-6205. I want to... All right. I cannot predict what's going to happen. I can only look at what's going out there, and I got to tell you the truth, I'm absorbing an insane amount of information on a daily basis. It really is somewhat overwhelming at times how much information I'm trying to absorb about this stuff, and I'm looking at certain things and looking how things are looking. Right now, the favorite of the two candidates to win the election is Kamala Harris. That's the favorite of that, and that's kind of clear. And I one of the things that, going back to that first thing I was talking about with Florida and Georgia and North Carolina, Trump has to almost sweep all of the toss-up states for him to have a chance at winning. He has to nearly sweep. Wisconsin is pretty much, and once again, this doesn't mean you don't work. It doesn't mean you don't door knock. Everyone votes. You have to act like democracy's on the ticket, because it is. Wisconsin is starting to become out of range for them. So there's one down. Nevada is starting to consistently be 4, 5, 6 points in the polls. And once again, two things about polls is, one, they clearly undercount Generation Z and millennials, but as well, they've also undercounted the Democratic vote by 5 to 15 points ever since the overturning of Roe v. Wade. That is a consistent pattern, and I have nothing to think that they haven't figured that out at this point. So those two states, where we work our ass off in Nevada, we work our ass off in Wisconsin, yes, those two states are looking fairly safe. So it gets to a point now where Trump has to win all the states that he is in, that he leads in, and then pretty much he has to take Michigan. He's got to take Pennsylvania. He's got to take Georgia. He's got to take North Carolina. He's got to take Arizona. And frankly, the problem for Republicans is that their base core voters are about the easiest people to gauge in a poll. So it's not only the fact that the Democratic voters are undercounted, but many of these polls are pretty much spot on with the Republicans. I mean, not all of them. I mean, some of them like Trafalgar and there's other ones, Rasmussen. They're pretty horrible polls. But these traditional ones where they're saying, oh, Trump is behind by 4 points, that's going to be pretty close because that's most of Trump's supporters. I mean, if they're actually counting Generation Z and millennials fairly, that is going to overwhelmingly benefit the Democrats. And that's that seems to be where the problem is with polling, is they kind of shrug their shoulders because they don't know how, because Generation Z and millennials don't have landlines. They don't generally, go on online polls. They don't generally do that stuff. So they still have a problem with that. And when the Harvard School did their analysis of this, they came up with, and they did a much more thorough analysis where they actually contacted Generation Z. It showed an overwhelming support for the Democrats. From Raw Story, Vice President Kamala Harris is drawing undecided voters to a campaign with policy proposals and messaging on a crucial issue, according to a new report. A release of a stunning September jobs report, which, in case you didn't miss that this morning, that was watching Republicans basically sit there and have a temper tantrum because the jobs report was as good as it was. As early voting gets underway, taking the wind out of former President Donald Trump's attack on Harris's economic policy. I'm not sure people appreciate the magnitude of one of Harris's biggest achievements in this campaign, fighting Trump to a near draw on the economy, wrote writer Greg Sargent. Harris is now dead even with Trump on which candidate likely voters will get inflation under control. Sargent argued Harris has work to do, but the work she's done has created crucial campaign momentum. Harris's messaging is working. I'll give you a great example of this on the other side. So Trump has to start winning over women. And what does he do? I am your protector. He comes out with this disastrous speech. And not only does he not appeal to women kind of turn him off more. I mean, even his own wife yesterday basically said, I don't agree with his policies about abortion. And, almost seemed to endorse Harris. So he's not making headway with the voters. Harris is. Harris's messaging is working. Harris has poured immense resources into highlighting the aspects of her economic agenda that are focused on affordability. Her campaign has spent $35 million broadcasting just 3 ads about her policies to curb costs to the variety of fronts, ads that have run over 50,000 times. I am stunned at how few Republican ads I have seen, especially like in football games and in baseball games where you usually will see a few of those come in. Nothing. The Democratic presidential nominee has also successfully distanced herself from economic problems voters attributed to Biden. Harris may have broken out of that doom loop and part of the thought that a sheer energy of her performance. The main focus on Harris has lifted her approval, which in turn had probably led voters to be open-minded, appreciating actual economic conditions, which are both inflation and joblessness are low. So it's an interesting thing. I will say this. One of the things that's been fascinating is this dock worker strike that got resolved. Republicans, I talked about how this morning the jobs report came out and Republicans were depressed about that because they desperately tried to spin those numbers negatively, and they just couldn't without sounding like an idiot. I mean, Maria Bartiromo on CNBC or on Fox Business tried desperately to spin them negatively, but, no one was buying it. But when you look at the dock worker strike, Republicans clearly had made this was going to be a point of contention that they were going to try to absolutely, exploit. So much so, because if you've not seen the footage, there are people in like Costco and Sam's Club lined up buying water bottles and toilet paper, neither of which are really imported that much. Pretty much most of the American toilet paper and water bottle supply comes from the United States. So it's not even coming through these ports. But I'm like, where in the world are you guys, you idiots, getting this? This is where you need to go get things. And I realized This was the Republicans ramping up. Oh, the dock strike. Oh, boy. Everything's going to be horrible. You should be afraid. And now that's gone. And a lot of people bought some water bottles and toilet paper. Knock yourself out. But it's clear the Republicans are trying to come up with a counterpoint, and these counterpoints keep getting knocked down. And at this point, we're seeing the game pieces on the board at this point. Chicago, Seattle, have a great weekend. Minneapolis, St. Paul, hour 2 up next. Hour number 2 of the show here on your Friday. Good to have you with us, Matt and Patrick. Brodkorb joining us a little bit later on. We'll talk to Viking stuff with him. But right now, joining us from the Children's Theater Company is Michi Barall from the Children's Theater Company. Michi Barall is a New York City-based actor, playwright, and academic. Holding degrees at Stanford University, NYU, and Columbia. Wow. She has taught at Columbia, NYU, and MIT. Wow, wow, wow. Currently, she's on the faculty of Purchase College, and she is joining us to talk about the Children's Theater Company's production of Drawing Lessons, which opens on the 8th and runs through November 10th over at the Children's Theater Company. And Michi is kind enough to join us. Michi, thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Hi, thanks so much. It's wonderful to see you.
It's nice to see you too. And by the way, I said that Michi Barall, right?
That's correct. Yeah, thank you.
I try my best. I'm amazed. My goodness, you are. I look at a resume sometimes and I'm like, oh wow, this is pretty impressive. You obviously have a real gift here, and I'm glad you're bringing it to Minnesota.
Well, I like being in school. I think that's really all that says, is I really enjoy being in school. I've really only spent about 10 years of my life not in school. But yeah, I mean, it's been a wonderful just experience being in Minneapolis and working with the Children's Theater, which is an incredible theater company with amazingly talented actors and producers and staff members. It really is such a gem you have in the city.
Well, and have you been here before? Did you come here, or when you decided to put this play on, did you say Children's Theater? That's where I'm going to go.
Well, so this is part of a commission from the Mellon Foundation. It's a partnership with a bunch of theater companies across the country. They're from underrepresented communities, and the commission basically gave CTC the option of building a repertory of plays from different playwrights from these different theaters of color. And so we started developing this play with the Michi Theater Company in New York City for CTC about 2 years ago. So we've been in process for a while. And actually the play itself is set in Minneapolis. So it's been really helpful to me in 1995. It's been helpful to me to actually be here and to get to work with people who are from the area, to work with locals, to be informants, and to really give me some of the details of what it was like for them growing up here in the 1990s.
I think it definitely gives you a very good perspective here. So why don't we hear a little bit about what exactly is Drawing Lessons about?
Sure. So Drawing Lessons is a story of a 12-year-old Korean-American girl growing up in Minneapolis in the 1990s who becomes a comic artist, who finds her voice as a visual artist with a lot of help from her friends, and also a local comic strip artist who's published in the Star Tribune, but is having his own struggles and kind of figuring what it is he wants to do next. So we use two artists in their development. Our protagonist, Kate, is struggling actually in school, having a hard time, as many kids do, being in 6th grade and trying to pay attention. And her gifts are really in the visual arts. And part of the story that we really want to tell is, everyone has an important way of seeing and an important way of speaking, even if they're quiet. And so we really want to uphold and celebrate all of the ways that people communicate. And so that's a big part of the story that we are working on. It's very much inspired by the middle grade graphic memoir for graphic novels. And so it's kind of, I've been in the tech process for the last few days, and it really is magical. Like it's like being inside a graphic novel. And I feel I can say that as a writer because all of that magic actually is owing to the work of our design team, which includes Blue Delaquanti, who's a professor at MCAD and an incredible comic artist, and our projection designer, Elizabeth Barrett, who's like really creating this incredibly dynamic landscape, also sound and set and lighting, of course. So it's really, if you are interested in graphic art or the graphic novel, you love comics, your kids love them, this is really a show that is built for multi-generational audiences. And we hope also to really kind of address people who grew up here in the 90s and who are growing up here today.
Let's talk a little bit about the concept of this. And I do love, I mean, because obviously for a lot of people, being able to hear from the playwright, being able to hear someone that's bringing a production to the stage. Talk about where, so were you just inspired? Was it one element of a story that inspired you that said, okay, I can flesh this out. This is something larger that can actually be a really good play?
So there are three sources of inspiration, I would say. So the first is that I worked with my friend Jack Tambouri, who's a director, on a previous production. We did a rock musical adaptation of Peer Gynt, and we had so much fun working together that we thought, okay, what is the next thing? And Jack said, I really want to see what live drawing is like on stage, just as a kind of theatrical gambit. What is it like to just watch someone build an image, in real time? So I had that in my head as, okay, what would I do with that? And I previous to this, really didn't have any fluency with graphic art. I mean, aside from reading the Sunday Funnies, I didn't read graphic novels or anything else. But my daughter was in about 5th grade at the time, and she was coming home from the library with a new graphic novel every week that she kept urging me, that she needed her own copy because she wanted to read and reread it, but she wanted to also get the next one. So I realized this was a thing, so incredibly popular. And I also was so impressed by the fact that there were so many female authors, who are writing stories about growing up and figuring out who they are. And I just thought the diversity of the voices was so incredible across race, across sexuality, across different cultural communities. It just was really amazing. You could go to the library or to the bookstore, the Barnes and Noble, and just see hundreds of titles. And you could not only learn these stories, but you also had this visual experience that was really, interactive. It's asking you to kind of think about the meaning of the picture in relationship to the text and to infer all these things that happen in between the panels. So I just thought it was such a sophisticated form. And I was really amazed by how kids just would get immersed in these worlds. And so I thought, okay, there's got to be a way to integrate the kind of aesthetics of the graphic novel and the wish to see, artists, visual artists drawing on stage, drawing that kind of in effect in that style on stage. And then the third piece, the reason it's set in Minneapolis is actually the actor who played Peer Gynt in that production that we worked on with my theater is my friend Matt Park. And Matt grew up in Minneapolis. And so I wrote the role of the father for Matt. Matt is playing the role of Matt in the current production.
Welcome
and
home.
So he lives, normally in Brooklyn, but he's living back in the Twin Cities with his sister right now so that he can be in the play, which is just a huge gift because he's a really wonderful actor. And it's been great to kind of write towards his capabilities. He's incredibly funny and also very heartfelt, and it's really wonderful.
You bring this up, and it's fascinating because you're right. Graphic novels. I've got 3 kids too, and the graphic novels really emerged as such a popular form of reading that was out there. And there's a very pop art, pop culture element to it. I mean, we just had the Keith Haring exhibit over at the Walker. You have these things that have kind of impacted how this art has changed. But it tells you how far the art has come, that we're actually taking this and trying to apply a graphic novel type of experience to the stage, which once again goes back to something you said earlier, is got to be a lot of fun to work with the technical crew over at Children's Theater, because I can't even comprehend how they're doing that.
They're amazing. There are all these panels. It's just a sight to behold. You really have to see it because it's really the synthesis of all of these art forms on stage. The costume design also I didn't mention, but it's genius. And you really it has the quality, like you were saying, of kind of pop art. They're a little cartoonish, but it's also very much in the same way that like the middle grade graphic novel is. It is a very heartfelt, earnest journey that these characters are on. It's very sincere. And that's also something I think that really touched me about those novels, is that they're really meeting kids where they are, like in a real way, as opposed to kind of in this like, ironic or sort of deflecting kind of way. It really kind of, meets them with the kind of anxiety and heart and wish to be seen and to interact with others and to be known by other people and to know other people. Like all those things were qualities of the format and the form that just really intrigued me and felt really suitable for the children's theater.
There's nothing wrong with a classic, Little Women or one of those great novels of the past. But the reality, if you want to understand where kids are at today, graphic novels are a major source of that, and you will understand kids better, which goes back to something you said at the very beginning, which I thought was just, as a parent, you're a parent, I'm a parent, and you said, sometimes you get a kid who's not doing that great in class, but all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, they can draw, or oh my gosh, they can act, oh my gosh, they can sing, or there is a class they're not being offered that they seem to be incredibly interested in. Talk about writing that, and in that sense being is that you're approaching something as the writer that you're, if you're like me, if a little older then, so having to relate to kids of that age. I think graphic novels are a great way to do it. Was it just graphic novels? Did you talk a lot with your child and your daughter there about, how you can write this to where it is appealing and understanding and real for the modern teenager?
Yeah, I mean, some of it comes from actually my experience as a teacher, and particularly in the wake of the pandemic. Now, I teach college students, so it's totally different. But I think all of us, right, during the pandemic also were kind of in the classroom with our kids. We were like at least trying to figure out how to help them. I was never in the classroom, but was always like trying to figure out like, well, how does fifth grade work? What do you need to do this homework? I don't know if this homework is necessary. It was just all of us trying to figure it out. And I think one of the things that I felt, and particularly talking to my students, was just that school can be an incredibly punitive place for a lot of kids, and a place in which if you don't have a certain set of skills, it can be really hard to navigate. And so I wanted all of us can feel lonely or a little alienated or a little like we don't know if we found our people yet in middle school, because it's such an intense period of transition and also transformation. Like there's so much happening. And you're taking in so much information about the world, like at that time. And especially now, there's like this kind of like fire hose, right? As you were saying, of information that we're all trying to like assimilate. And so I kind of wanted to stage that experience. And I wanted to give myself a little bit and the audience a little bit of a challenge by foregrounding or putting at the center a character who's pretty quiet, and that's one of the reasons why they're struggling in school. And who, just to kind of like be with them and to try and figure out what it means to be inside their experience of like quieting the noise and really being with like a visual landscape, an intake of the kind of visual world, processing the world through kind of sensory information that is visual, right? So that was really my investment, was to kind of like, just celebrate kids with that skill and of being able to see the world in a certain way and also to render it on the page. I also wanted to build a little bit as a kind of takeaway for any budding artists, right? That there is like a set of skills that are really kind of primary, that if you have them, you can begin to craft lines that feel more like the ones that you want to put on the page. At the same time, I think the most important principle in the play, really thematically, is that, anyone can draw, and that everyone should probably draw a little if they, can or have the desire to. But there's something about your line, uncluttered, like the line that you drew when before you had an idea of what was like good or what was bad or whether it looked like something or didn't look like something, that line has something to do with who you are, you know? And everyone's line is a little distinct and wonderful.
You mentioned something there, and as you talk about that, I mean, obviously, there is a real post-pandemic element to these arts, and not just you and this. I've seen a lot of this where it's kind of like during the pandemic when you talk about the art there, you know, finding whatever that thing you can do on your own, whatever gives you joy, whatever finds happiness, that thing where it's not just staring at a glowing rectangle all the time, that you should find something like this. But as well, the concept of trying to help young kids, many of them, I mean, obviously this play is geared towards kids who are middle schoolers, you know, older elementary school, middle schoolers, high schoolers. A lot of them just 5 years ago were kind of lost. And because of this pandemic, and in trying to have these kids come to grips with this, that this is what's happened. We're trying to, we understand that this did happen, and we see you, we hear you, and whatever path you may take, you know, that's good. That's a good thing. It's just, you know, maybe one of the things that's an offshoot of this is that the formalities that we had pre-pandemic needed maybe to be broken down a little bit to give some kids the advantage of being able to recover from that time when we were down in the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also just really encouraging kids to write their own stories, to think of their own stories as important, you know, contributions to a larger archive of experience, of experiences of the world and of other people. It's really important to me that Kate, we're following her journey, but that like she really is, in the same way that this play was built, she really is part of a village, you know, so it really is about a community that's diverse, it's cosmopolitan, that has all kinds of people in it, who really come together to support this young artist's voice. And just how important that is, right? As any kind of artist, or really any kind of human, that you have, you know, investment from whoever it is, you know, who takes an interest in your work in some way, who takes you seriously in your work. Like that's such an important and formative experience, I think, especially for kids today.
Well, and you're at the Children's Theater, which is, I mean, and as you said, this is an organization that's out there trying to make these conversations have to happen. It's easy to put on great presentations that everyone knows, but building plays and art that is relatable for this generation after the experiences they've been through, I think is so darn important right now.
Yeah, we try very much to really celebrate not just Kate's culture, home culture, but like so many cultures that are represented in Minneapolis, and Minneapolis itself, as well as like just an incredible location and place to grow up. I grew up in Toronto, and I remember the first book that I read in which Toronto was a setting, and it made me feel somehow so like located, like I had a place, right, that was real, because it was in a book. It was somehow more real because it was in the book, which was like very strange. Yeah. But I really felt like it's important for us, especially now, because the national conversations are so hard, but to really kind of think, right, about your neighbors and what you have to learn from them, and the conviviality of growing up in neighborhoods, you know, and particularly neighborhoods like Minneapolis that support kids in the way that the Children's Theater does. I mean, a really special thing about the Children's Theater is that it features child performers. Yeah. So all the performers in my cast who are designated as kids in the show are performed by kids, and they're really incredible. I mean, they get up at 6:30. I mean, you have kids, right? Yeah. So they get up at 6:30, they go to school, and they come to us at 4:30, and they work until 9:30 at night, and then they get up and they do it again. And in between, somehow they get their homework done and they learn their lines. I mean, I don't actually know how they do what they do, but you know, they have a real commitment to each other and to process. And this theater really builds like incredible professional actors, you know, who are kid actors, but on equal standing with the professional grown-up actors who are on stage with them.
I would say the playwright has a lot to do with that. That's what motivates them. The playwright got them there. The good content. They're at children's theater. It's easy to see how they can do it. But I'm with you. It's like, how are you doing this? I had one thing to my day. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So that's it. It's exactly. Drawing Lessons is at children's theater. It opens up on October 8th, runs to November 10th. Tickets available at childrenstheater.org. I'll link to all that a little bit later on. Michi Barall, thank you so much. Thank you for bringing this here. Thank you for working with these kids. Thank you for your art, and thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was so great to talk to you. I really appreciate it.
And Michi Barall, once again, Children's Theater and Drawing Lessons. Go see it. Go see it. Take your kids. This is a good one. Take the kids. Go see this while it's there for a little more than a month, starting in coming up here next week. We'll take a break. Come on back. It's the Matt McNeil Show here on your Friday.
Everybody knows that you talk, saying I'm the one that you want. Boy, bring a game, what you got. Really had enough of your
AM
talk.
950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. The Children's Theater, once again, just absolutely driving lessons. Go over there and drawing lessons. Go over there and check that out over there at Children's Theater. Just sounds fantastic. And gosh, I am fascinated in how they're going to take a graphic novel and present that on the stage. That is too cool. That's got to be amazing. That's just got to be amazing. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. So I got to... by the way, first of all, I should mention Vote Vets has responded to Royce White, the bad guys won World War II, dismissing the fight against Nazi fascism as the battle of controlling interest. This isn't just bizarre, it's reprehensible. It's his unhinged rants and attacks on his own party show exactly why the GOP's candidate problem is a threat to us all. No, he's a nutbag, man. We still have, I think as soon as they close the polls in Minnesota, they're going to call Klobuchar the winner. And at this point, I think the only chance the Republicans have, and I'm not trying to help them, but I'm just saying this is just an observation. I think the only chance the Republicans have if they're going to try to get the Minnesota House is to actively campaign against Royce White. That they have to actively campaign against Royce White. I think that's the only chance they got. I mean, they're already frantically out there going, I'm really an independent. No, you're not. You're a Republican. And just because you're in the suburbs and they don't like Trump and they don't like Royce White, you only have one option is to try to deceive people into thinking that you're somehow different. Yeah, it's just horrible. Okay, so I'm a little. So earlier today, there was a guy named Cabot Phillips. I don't know who this guy is. I have no idea who this guy is. His name's Cabot, C-A-B-O-T. Dear Lord. Cabot Phillips, I spent a day in Minneapolis to see what's like under Tim Walz. What I found was a city in decline. Now, what he found was somebody specifically told him to go to specific areas and push a very specific narrative that he was there. Because he sure as heck didn't go around the town. I mean, my gosh, the Sculpture Garden, you could go down to the lake, the riverfront downtown, go to one of the many Great Lakes there. I could go down to East Street. We could go down to any of the communities. Go to North Loop, go across the river, down by the University of Minnesota. They go to go to Uptown. I was down in Uptown last weekend. It was fantastic. Lindale Lake is busy as all get. There are plenty of places you could go where you could have a good time. This person clearly was fed a very specific list of places to go and talking points to basically there. Because if you watch this, and if you go up on the Twitter feed, I've linked there. I haven't linked to it. I linked to the image of this guy's thing because I didn't want to necessarily help him. But if you go and look where he's going, and you know Minneapolis at all, you know that he specifically went to bad areas. Liz Collins apparently shows up in there as well. Yeah. Are you guys okay? Okay. Give me a town that I'm not the biggest fan of Indianapolis. I'm not the biggest fan of Indianapolis. I'm not. I was in Indianapolis before. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll do one even better. I could name a few. I won't name any towns. Let's say there is a small town in Minnesota where I had a bad experience. Really bad experience. Just really bad. Was horrible. Was a very unwelcoming atmosphere. Was a very broken town. There's a lot of people there that had a lot of issues. And yeah, it was disappointing. I ran into a lot of angry, bitter people that were looking for things to take their lives out on, and I couldn't help them. And it was a very miserable experience. What I did, okay, see if you can follow here. I moved. I don't know if you caught that there. I moved away. I didn't want to be around a bunch of unhappy jerks in a town I really didn't like. Were there still, though, positive things about the town? Yeah. I thought the area I was in the nature was very pretty up there. There were some nice lakes that were there. There was one or two restaurants that had some decent food. But overall, the rest of the town sucked, and I gladly left. And I have not been back, nor do I plan on going back. Now, that all being said, my experience about this town is very legitimate. I mean, it's very real. I had a really bad time there. I had a bad boss. I had bad coworkers. I had a bad time there. But yet, I don't sit for hours every day writing tweets, making films, putting up blog posts, doing these things about this town. I walked away. That's my option. You don't like it there, you leave. I could badmouth that town all day long. Easily. The Republicans in this state are so determined to make Minneapolis bad. It seems like somebody paid this guy. There was a coordinated effort. I want to think about this for a second. Think about how broken of a person you have to be. You coordinated this. You brought somebody into town. You brought a film crew. You were paying people. Someone got an airline flight. Someone had a hotel room. Someone had a rental car. You gave them directions. You specifically went out there and you coordinated this just so you could badmouth the town by cherry picking the worst areas you could find to try to present that as what Minneapolis was. By the way, on the quick side note, screw you all and your agenda. Screw you, you sad, pathetic people, because that's what it is. If you don't want to be here, go. We don't need you. Now, people talk about Liz Collins and they talk about Bob Kroll. I will say there's an element there that seems to be the jaded ex-boyfriend concept. And this is at least what it appears to be. I'm not saying it is definitively, just on appearances. This is what pure speculation. But I mean, I'll go with the ex-boyfriend thing. Say you have somebody who is dating a boyfriend who's really bad for them. That person is being hurt by them being in the relationship. And finally, that girl wakes up, realizes, okay, this is not going anywhere, and leaves. And the ex is there. They build up this mentality in their mind that things were so much better when they were with me. They were so much better then. That sort of thing. And here they are, and it infuriates them because they're still friends with that person on Facebook, and they see that their ex has moved on, gotten married, lives very happily, is having a great time. They clearly do not think about the ex at all, and their lives are so much better, and it infuriates them because that is just who that person is, the jaded ex-boyfriend. That seems to kind of be the mentality I especially see with guys like Bob Kroll and Liz Collins, where they're so desperate to make their broken version of the cities, namely that police department under Kroll, that it was so much better back then that they are so, they have to sit and basically, and they watch us all having a good time. They watch us all getting ranked really high. They watch the community. They watch the happy people, and it infuriates them. And so they have to go on out there because the only thing that gets these sad, sad people through the day, the only thing is to vilify the city. That's the only thing I can think of. Because if you hate it so much, why are you even here? Why? I lived in a town. I had a bad time. I left. I don't talk about it. I don't mention it. I don't run a blog about it. I don't make hourly posts about it. I'm not hiring a camera crew to come into town to go and basically vilify it even more. Done. But yet this seems to be the only thing that gets some people through their day is hours of vilifying Minneapolis, vilifying St. Paul. Every city has its problems. Everyone does. Everyone does. Even the small ones, they have problems too. Go look at the amount of meth labs around in rural Minnesota. Dear Lord, is that an epidemic? We all have problems. But Minneapolis, St. Paul kicks caboose. This town is great. Even my conservative Republican friends have said to me, yeah, I'm not leaving. Health care quality schools. It's pretty here. It's a nice place to be. Absolutely. Doesn't mean you have to agree with the politics. But have you been to some of these other towns, these other cities? This town is great. I'm sorry you had a bad experience. But we're not going to break up with what we've got right now to go back to what we had. And so you can sit here and still be the angriest little person on the block, still anger scrolling on Facebook about how much happier Minneapolis, St. Paul is without you. Or you can freaking move on. Because at this point, this is just getting sad. It is. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. Michael Brodkorb will join us. Once again, Michael Brodkorb and I are geniuses. We'll talk about that when we come back. It is the Matt McNeil Show. Vikings talk when we return. It is the Matt McNeil Show on AM 950. AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. It's the Matt McNeil Show. We veer into sports for the rest of the show today as Michael Brodkorb, who is, of course, a political pundit in town, has his own podcast, but, of course, he is also our Minnesota Vikings expert, and we have him on Fridays to talk about the week we just had as well as the weekend ahead and the games there. Hello, Michael. How are we?
Matt, how are you? It's great to be here today.
I'm glad to have you here. You and I. Okay, so last week, here was our call. We said, I could see this being a blowout, but the way these NFC North games go, they always tighten up and it becomes a 1 or 2 score game every time. And that, how did we do that? I mean, that is nuts, man. That's exactly what happened.
I went back and listened. Our last episode was like an M. Night Shyamalan movie. It all came together. It was unbelievable. It was creepy how right we were. And I mean, look at Matt. You and I are used to being super geniuses. It's
of course,
tough to be us.
Yeah.
But I mean, boy, oh boy, to broadcast like that and call our shot. We're geniuses.
We are. Well, I mean, the fact that you and I have done so far. I mean, with procrastination and prognostication and stuff like that, that we've been able to go 4-0 on this season so far. And yeah, it's this team is looking good. Now, let me ask you a few things about this last game with the Packers. Okay, how concerned are you that the Packers were able to? They were down 28-0. We end up winning 31-29. How concerned were you that the defense did allow them to come back like that?
I was concerned and I was worried about it. I was watching it with some friends. My wife is a Packers fan. She wasn't there for part of the day, which was disappointing because I would have enjoyed that misery of seeing her suffer in our living room up close and personal, but I missed that opportunity. I was worried when they went to the half, when that we had that kind of screw up at the half.
Yeah.
And they went in, I think they went into the half 28-7. I said to some neighbors, I said, I don't like the momentum shift going into the half. And it turned out to be true. And I kind of went through this this kind of grieving process that Vikings fans do, which is when we get something nice, we're worried that it's going to get taken away. It's a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so I tried to let go a little bit and just be like, look, just enjoy this while it's happening. It did get closer. And then we turned out to be right. I was a little concerned about that. But once again, the Vikings are 4-0. They went into Green Bay and they won. And what they've done here, there's always room for improvement. And so what I'm trying to do, particularly what I prepped myself for this show, was to try to do is be proportional in my criticism, but also be appreciative of where we're at.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you one thing that should make a lot of Vikings fans feel good. So they score, it is, I think at that point, 28-22. So they're now within a score. Now, what the Vikings have done in the past would have been this. They will get the ball, run, no gain, run, no gain, pass the ball for 4 yards and wonder why he didn't get 10. We kick the ball away. They didn't do that. They came on out and Darnold started to do something which we generally don't see Vikings quarterbacks do, which is pass down the field. We get that field goal. It becomes a 2-score game again. And I just sort of said to myself, dear God, does this guy figure this out? That if you get down like this, fine, you've got the weapons. Trying to play prevent offense is not the way you do it. And they got that field goal, and that was it. And then they were stuck trying to hope they could get an onside kick. And if you're at that point, more than likely it's over at that point.
No, I think the structure of the Vikings games, they're just being run better. And I think this team is clicking. And I think that there's been, if you listen to any sports show or us in general, go back and listen, there's always little quirks and things that we can talk about. But fundamentally, the Vikings are winning these games, and they're winning these in ways in which I think we're trying to search and struggle for reasons to be critical. Sure, they blew a 28-0 lead, but they were at home against they were on the road with Green Bay. The Vikings came away with the win. There's room for improvement. There's lessons that could be learned. And I have to say something to you. There's something that I'm doing that I've done the last 2 seasons, and this is just advancement in technology. Kevin O'Connell's speeches after the game are incredible to watch.
They are
just from a leadership perspective, just in how he messages to his team. It is really impressive. And I can't imagine the censors that would have had to been there when, Jerry Burns or Bud Grant was giving speeches. But just to have that, there is true leadership in this organization. And to see that come out of, and to see Kevin O'Connell after each game bring up some suggestions and things that they need to prove, but also handing out those game balls. There is something special happening this season with this Vikings. And I will say to you, it's coming. Obviously, there's players on the field, but a lot of this is coming from the top down.
Well, and you bring up that those are little things which really make a matter. In Detroit, then that game they had with Seattle, the quarterback was perfect, and the guy didn't give him a game ball because he didn't realize the how well the quarterback had played in that game. And I said, and he himself, knowing he had screwed up, the next day was like, I'm so sorry, I should have given him a game ball. Yeah, you should have. And, if you have a coach that understands these little things, the culture that happens there, it goes a long way. And you're seeing our team, when they need to flip that switch on, like they did in that Green Bay game, they did. Got the field goal, and they said, we got a game plan to win this. And it did not help. Green Bay, they've got some problems. That kicking game, and frankly, love some of those passes he threw. What was he thinking?
It was simultaneously beautiful to see, but also, I didn't feel bad, of course.
Oh no, not at all.
But no, it was. I'm glad to see the Vikings win, and now we're going across the pond, which I don't like.
Well, okay, so let's start. What is your go-to tailgating food? If you a main course of a tailgate, what do you do generally if it's an afternoon or an evening game?
Well, this is a breakfast game.
Yeah, that's because that's what I was going to ask. It's like you might do burgers, you might do pork chops, you might do ribs, whatever the case. What are you doing for breakfast?
So what I'm going to hopefully do is inviting my sisters and some neighbors over for the game to watch. Here's the challenge with me, Matt.
Okay.
I don't do well during Vikings game. I'm pacing. I go around. I don't when I go to the Vikings games. I don't eat a ton. I'm there like to host family members, and so I get really nervous. I'm pacing the room, going back and forth. I'm going to want to make sure that my guests at my house are happy. I'll serve some good food. I'll probably have a mix of a good breakfast stuff. I'll probably have the girl going outside to help serve some things up. But during the Vikings game, it's a challenge for me because I just get too into the game. I'm antsy. I'm walking around. I'm yelling at the TV. I'm yelling at other people. I'm cheering. I'm crying. I'm curled up in the fetal position. It's just tough to eat when you're that emotional during a game.
You get your
you
get your steps in, huh? You get your
Yes,
steps in.
I will also say something to you, which I'm somewhat proud of to admit, but maybe a bit embarrassed. I was alone for part of last Sunday's game for just a brief minute, and my Apple Watch went off when I was by myself because I was in a loud environment by myself. That shows you how loud I yelled during the game.
You and I were texting each other. I was getting updates on the game at Jay Cook State Park up in northern off of Esco. I'm hiking out the park there, and I'm like, the magnificent beauty of this. No, the magnificent beauty is we're up 28-0 at the Packers at Green Bay, and I was loving watching that as I enjoyed and soaked in the beautiful nature that is Minnesota.
It was almost eerie to watch that game knowing how close you and I called it. Like,
God,
we should maybe consider gambling or betting or something.
No.
But
this is for us, man. This is the rest of the world can.
Amazing.
No.
It's just amazing how we literally called the whole game.
We kind of did.
It was amazing to watch.
Okay, so now we got to focus on the Jets in London. Now, if the Jets were coming here, I don't think either one of us. Yeah, this is going to be a stomping. But Is there something about the fact that this, quote, home game for the Vikings is in London, and it's really not a home game? It's a exhibition game where we're on the road for a home game.
Well, first of all, I did my homework in preparation because I appreciate these opportunities so much to come on. Vikings are undefeated in London, okay. and so I think they're going to do well. I think in London, I think they're. I don't like these games. It's just a challenge for me. It takes away. I understand the NFL is trying to grow, and I'm appreciative of the fact that the Vikings are an asset. They're going across the pond, but we beat Great Britain we beat England in 2 wars, and so I don't know that having the Vikings there is something should be a reward. I don't know that I'm excited about that, but I have all indications I think the Vikings should win. But I worry about the travel. I worry about just the time change and that type of dynamic. But by all accounts, the Vikings should win.
Was the last time they were there, was that Cincinnati game where the guy missed the field goal at the end and we won it? Was that it?
It may have been.
Oh, that could have been, yeah.
It was New Orleans they played.
New Orleans, was that the game, though? Was it they bounced the...
Yeah, that was where their guy hit a 60-yarder to tie the game, and then they got in position for another 60-yarder to tie the game again, and he hit it off the upright.
That's right. All right, so there you go.
Right. Good call from the voice of ours.
He's 10 times smarter than I am on this stuff. All right, so Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, we saw last week, there's not a lot there. And unless the Vikings take a massive step backwards, I can't see the Vikings not winning this game. 2 touchdowns. I mean, I could see a 28-14. I could see that easy.
It's your show. I don't want to mess with the cadence, but we've done this in a very specific way.
Yes.
And I don't want to mess with the streak. Is that your prediction?
Yeah, I'll make that 28-14 Vikings.
Yeah, I've listened to our previous episodes, so I'm going to just say I agree with you because that's what's working. I'm not going to mess with anything. And then if we're wrong, we'll go down together, but I feel good about that pick. I think your pick is smart.
You can blame me. You can blame me.
No, I won't. I'm going to be appreciative of coming on. I'm not going to do anything to offend the person inviting me, but I don't want to. I'll accept it, and then because the last thing I want to do is complicate this process because we've been doing great.
We are so far. I just it. Considering where this team is at, and I mean, we are not the only people that we're kind of impressed with what we're doing. I mean, the entire league is realizing now the Vikings are a legit team. That win at Green Bay was legit. And these next 2 games, I think they get through these next 2 with this game, the Jets, and then after the bye week, Detroit at home. Right now you look at the rest of the schedule. This is looking really good for the Vikes.
Well, the way you said that, the way it sounded like the entire league was appreciative of what we were doing. And I think they should be because you and I are calling these games spot on. I do have a friend who has been pretty consistent about saying that he looks at the rest of the season and doesn't see a loss. That's something that you kind of alluded to. I think both of us would probably be surprised if the Vikings went undefeated. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but the schedule is pretty good for the Vikings the rest of the year.
I will say this right now. I don't see them winning at Detroit. I don't see them winning at Seattle right now. I'm not saying because that Seattle team is legit. They went into Detroit and really they got some good punches in on them. So those are the 2. The rest of it, I mean, the Jags, the Colts. I'm feeling okay about some things here, man.
Where does that leave us for playoffs then? Does that put us in, at least we're probably hosting, we're winning the NFC. We're winning the NFC North. We're probably hosting at least one playoff game. But I don't think either of us are at a point where we're saying that the Vikings are the number one seed in the NFC.
I say let's get to Thanksgiving, man. We get to Thanksgiving at this point, the end of next month.
Thanksgiving.
Well, it's it.
I love Thanksgiving.
We'll get to Thanksgiving next month. And at that point, we'll have a very good idea, I think. Because those two games, by the way, that Seattle game, that Detroit game would come up after that. I think we'll have a pretty good idea of what it would take for them to be able to be in a good position, all right?
Yeah, just as I've said before, Seattle always makes me nervous. And Detroit, I think, is getting a little cocky.
Yeah, well, they like to punch people in the face, man. That's for sure. And but the Vikings are punching back this year, and they're punching back hard. Michael Brodkorb, our Vikings pick for the week. Michael, as always, thank you. Next week, let's have you back. We'll talk politics, okay?
I appreciate the opportunity so much, man. Thanks so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Michael Brodkorb, we'll take a break. Come on back. A little music when we head out for the weekend. It's the Matt McNeil Show. That's going to do it for us for the week. Thank you very much for being with us. We will be back on a Monday. Native Ridge Radio is up next. Till then, 30th special and see ya.
Just